Before the light came, there was only silence. A silence so thick, it hung in the air like fog. A silence that carried the weight of centuries, of people searching for meaning, reaching out into the void, and hearing nothing in return. The earth had forgotten how to listen. Hearts had grown cold. Empires had risen and fallen, each one claiming to hold the truth, yet all leaving the same darkness behind. The world before the Qur'an was a world without direction, where tribes worshipped stone, where daughters were buried beneath the sand, and where power, greed, and pride ruled like kings. And then, something shifted. Something invisible, yet unstoppable. Like the first breath before dawn. It began in a cave. Not a palace. Not a temple. A cave, carved deep into the lonely mountains of Hira. There sat a man, wrapped in silence, wrapped in thought. A man who would one day change the world forever. But tonight, he was just a seeker. He wasn't asking for greatness. He wasn't asking for followers. He was asking for truth. And in that stillness, the heavens broke open. A presence filled the cave, vast and radiant. The man's heart trembled, his breath caught. And then came the command that would rewrite history. Iqra. He didn't know he could. He didn't know what to say. But that word, that single word, shook through his bones like thunder from another realm. Read, in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of blood, who taught by the pen, who taught man what he knew not. And with those words, light entered a world that had long forgotten what light felt like. For 40 years, the man had walked among his people, honest. They called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy. But now, something beyond understanding had touched him. Something divine had chosen him. He ran down the mountain, trembling, shaking, his heart echoing with verses that wouldn't stop repeating. He reached his home and said, "Cover me. Cover me." And from that moment, the night was never the same again. The message didn't arrive all at once. It descended like rain, drop by drop, verse by verse. Over 23 years. Each verse, a light. Each word, a mirror. Each revelation, a reminder that the Creator had not abandoned his creation. It spoke to kings and beggars, to warriors and poets, to hearts that had been silent for far too long. It spoke of mercy when the world knew only vengeance. It spoke of oneness when men worshipped 1,000 names. It spoke of justice, of compassion, of faith, of the unseen, and of the soul that forgets where it came from. The Qur'an did not just speak, it awakened. It pierced the illusion that life was random. It told humankind, you were created with purpose. But with light, always comes resistance. And those who had lived in the shadows feared it. They mocked him. They called him mad, a poet, a liar. They threw stones at those who believed. They tortured, they exiled, they cursed. But the message did not fade. Because this was not a message born of men. It was born of heaven. And heaven does not retreat. Years passed. Battles were fought. Hearts were tested. Yet through every storm, the verses kept descending. Stronger, deeper, more radiant. They came in moments of despair, in nights of solitude, in mornings of war and evenings of peace. They came to remind, do not lose hope. For indeed, with hardship comes ease. And they came to promise, light will always return. The Qur'an was not just a book. It was a living presence. It was sound that shaped souls. It was rhythm that healed hearts. It was language so divine that even those who opposed it could not imitate it. Arab poets, masters of words, heard its verses and fell silent. They said, this is not the speech of a man. Because the Qur'an did not speak to the mind. It spoke through the heart. And once it entered a heart, it never left. Soon, what began in a cave spread like dawn across the deserts. From Mecca to Medina. From hearts once filled with arrogance to hearts now softened by tears. Slaves stood beside rulers. Rich beside poor. All equal before the one who created them. For the first time in centuries, the world began to remember what unity felt like. The Qur'an redefined what it meant to be human. Not defined by tribe or blood, but by faith, by character, by the light within. And as each verse descended, it didn't just build a nation, it built a consciousness that whispered, "You are seen, you are known, and you are never alone." That is where it began. A cave, a man, a word, and a light that will never be extinguished. But this is only the beginning of the story, because what came after was far greater than anyone could have imagined. It didn't stop with a cave. It didn't stop with the trembling of a man's heart. It grew, to spread. It awakened something in every soul that dared to listen. The Quran began to breathe. Through people, through voices, through time. It was no longer just revelation. It was revolution. A revolution of hearts, of consciousness, of destiny. Every verse descended like a spark. And from those sparks, flames began to rise. Flames that burned through centuries of ignorance. Flames that lit torches across deserts and oceans. The man who once trembled in a cave now stood upon mountains and declared truth to kings. He who once whispered in the shadows now carried the voice of heaven across nations. They tried to silence him. They tried to erase the verses. But how do you silence light? How do you erase what is written by the Eternal? They tore pages, but the pages lived in hearts. They exiled believers, but faith crossed borders. They broke bodies, but they could not break souls. Because this was not a message made of ink. It was made of breath, of sound, of divine vibration that lives and moves in every age. The Quran spoke of justice, and tyrants fell. It spoke of mercy, and warriors wept. It spoke of patience, and mothers held their faith through storms. It spoke of hope, and those lost in despair began to breathe again. It told humanity, you were not created for chaos. You were created for purpose. You were created to know the one who created you. And for those who listened, the world changed forever. As the revelation continued, the world began to divide, not by tribe or nation, but by hearts that could hear, and hearts that refused to. Some hearts softened like rain on dry soil. Others hardened like stone. But the verses kept coming, gentle as mercy, powerful as thunder. It was no longer just history unfolding. It was heaven reaching into time, touching each soul that dared to awaken. Still, the prophet never claimed the glory for himself. He said, "I am only a messenger." His greatness was in his humility. His power was in his surrender. He walked among the poor. He smiled at orphans. He mended what others broke. And when he prayed, the universe seemed to fall silent to listen. He was not sent to rule the world, but to remind it. The Quran became the heartbeat of civilization. It shaped languages. It built nations. It carved art and science and poetry out of divine rhythm. It called thinkers to question, seekers to travel, and the lost to remember who they are. Its verses spoke of stars and seas, of souls and shadows, of creation and resurrection. And within every verse, a secret waited for the one who truly listened. Centuries passed. Empires fell. But the voice of the Quran never faded. Kings changed thrones. Nations changed flags. Yet the same sound that once filled the cave of Hira still echoes in the call of the muezzin, 5 times a day, across every horizon. Each Allahu Akbar is the same vibration that once shook the mountain of light. Each recitation, a living thread tying the present back to the moment it all began. And now, in this century of noise and confusion, the world again forgets how to listen. We scroll, push, searching for meaning in mirrors that only reflect our shadows. But somewhere deep inside, a whisper returns. So persistent, like the first light before dawn. Iqra. The same command, the same echo, calling you not to read with your eyes, but to read with your soul, to read yourself, to read the signs in the sky and in the earth, to remember that the Quran was never just a book. It was a conversation between heaven and you. So when your heart feels lost, when silence presses against your chest, go back to the cave within you, that quiet space where no one else can enter. Because revelation didn't only happen then. It still happens now. Every time you open the book, every time a verse meets your tears, Every time you feel your soul tremble at a single word, that is revelation. Alive, breathing, eternal. And one day, when all the voices fade, when the noise of the world falls silent again, the same words that once descended in the darkness will rise again in light, testifying to those who listened and to those who turned away. Because truth never dies, and light never leaves, and in the end, it will not be kings or empires that remain. It will be the same voice that began it all. Iqra, read. For the story never ended. It only waited for you to remember where it began.